The divorce papers landed with a sound that seemed to echo through eternity. Karen's hand didn't shake as she slid them across the mahogany desk toward Cha Suk-chin, though inside, her heart was splintering into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Behind him, Seoul's criminal empire glittered through floor-to-ceiling windows, a kingdom they'd built together with her brilliance and his blood. But tonight it meant nothing. "Sign them," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of 8 years of betrayal. Suk-chin didn't move. His dark eyes, the ones that had once looked at her with fierce devotion, were distant, already somewhere else. With someone else. "Karen, we can fix this," he began. "Fix this?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it, only the sharp edge of a woman who'd finally seen the truth. "You can't fix what you broke 8 months ago when you chose her over your son's birthday. When you chose a ghost over your family." His jaw tightened. That name hung between them like poison. Maeng Jee. The woman from his past. The woman he believed was dying. The woman who was destroying everything. "I know who she really is, Suk-chin," Karen said, her voice dropping to something cold and final. "I know what she's been doing. And if you'd loved me, really loved me, you would have seen it too." Down the hall, 7-year-old Brian slept fitfully, drawings of incomplete families scattered across his bedroom floor. A son who'd stopped calling him Appa. A marriage 8 months from total collapse. The first domino had already fallen. Karen was just here to watch the rest. Before we continue the story, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss what happens next. 3 months earlier, their penthouse was alive with the kind of joy Karen had almost forgotten was possible. Balloons in every color drifted against the ceiling, and Brian's laughter, pure and unfiltered, filled every corner of their home. Karen stood by the kitchen counter, watching her husband wear a ridiculous paper crown, his expensive suit jacket abandoned, his face smeared with chocolate frosting as their son gleefully attacked him with cake-covered hands. "Appa! Appa! You look like a monster!" Brian shrieked with delight. Suk-chin growled playfully, scooping Brian up and spinning him around. For one perfect moment, Karen remembered why she'd fallen in love with this man. Not the crime boss who controlled half of Seoul's underworld. Not the dangerous, calculating strategist who made men twice his size flinch. But this. The man who could shed his armor and be completely present for their son. Then his phone rang. Karen saw it before he did. The way Suk-chin's entire body went rigid, the laughter dying in his throat. He set Brian down gently, his eyes already distant as he pulled the phone from his pocket. The color drained from his face, his jaw locked tight. "Suk-chin." Karen's voice carried a warning she didn't quite understand yet. He stepped away into the hallway, his voice dropping to a murmur she couldn't hear. Brian tugged at her sleeve. "Mommy, when are we opening presents?" Appa promised. "Soon, baby. Soon." But Karen knew. She always knew. When Suk-chin returned, he wasn't the same man who'd been laughing 30 seconds ago. His eyes had that look, the one he got when someone died, when territory was lost, when the empire demanded blood. "I have to go." The words came out mechanical. Emergency. Brian's face crumbled like paper caught in flame. "But Appa, you promised. You said we'd open presents together. You promised." Suk-chin knelt down, but his hands were already reaching for his car keys. His eyes were already somewhere else. "Hongjun." Something important came up. "I'll make it up to you, I swear." "You always say that." Brian's voice cracked, tears spilling down his chocolate-smeared cheeks. "You always say that, and you never do." Karen felt something cold settle into her stomach. She followed Suk-chin into their bedroom, closing the door behind her. What emergency? Her legal training kicked in. She read people for a living, read situations, read lies. He was already changing clothes, stripping off the cake-stained shirt, pulling on something darker, more serious. His movements had that urgent precision that terrified her because it meant he was compartmentalizing, shutting down emotion, becoming the other version of himself. "Someone from my past." His voice was tight. She's dying, Karen. Cancer. Stage 4. She has no one else." The words landed like physical blows. Karen's throat constricted. "Who?" He hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but she caught it. Maeng Jee. The name detonated in the space between them. Karen remembered it from years ago, from a night when Suction had drunk too much expensive whiskey and gotten melancholic, talking about the girl he'd loved before the blood, before the empire, before everything got complicated. His first love, the ghost he'd supposedly buried. "You're leaving our son's birthday party." Karen's voice shook with something between rage and disbelief. "For an ex-girlfriend?" Suction's eyes flashed dangerously. "She's dying alone, Karen. She called from a hospital. She has no family, no one. What would you have me do? Ignore her? Let her die without. Stay with your family?" The words exploded out of her. "That's what you do. You stay with your wife and your son on his 7th birthday. You keep the promise you made to a little boy who worships you." But Suction was already moving toward the door, his face hardening into that mask she hated, the one that meant he'd made his decision and nothing would change it. "I'll be back in a few hours. 2, maybe 3. We'll open presents then. He'll be asleep by then and you know it." Suction paused at the doorway, his hand on the frame. For a moment, Karen thought he might turn around, might choose them, might remember that family comes first. But then he was gone, his footsteps echoing down the marble hallway. Karen stood frozen, listening to the sound of the front door closing. Down the hall, she could hear Brian crying, not the dramatic crying of a tantrum, but the broken, confused crying of a child who doesn't understand why Appa keeps leaving. She walked slowly back to the living room. Brian sat in the hallway, cake still smeared on his small hands, staring at the front door like his father might come back through it. Like if he waited long enough, Appa would remember. "Mommy." His voice was so small. "Did I do something wrong?" Karen's heart shattered. She knelt down and pulled him close, feeling his tears soak into her dress. "No, baby. No, you didn't do anything wrong." But as she held her son, as she felt him shake with confused grief, Karen felt something shift inside her. Something cold and clear and absolutely certain. That night, after Brian finally cried himself to sleep, Karen lay awake in their enormous bed, staring at the empty space beside her. Suction sighed. Cold. Untouched. Her phone glowed on the nightstand, 2:47 a.m. He'd said 2, maybe 3 hours. It had been 8. Karen rolled over and stared at Seoul's glittering skyline through their bedroom windows. Somewhere out there, her husband was with another woman. A dying woman. His first love. And for the first time in 8 years of marriage, Karen allowed herself to think the unthinkable. What if this is the beginning of the end? Her hand moved to her phone. Her fingers hovered over the screen for a long moment before she opened her contacts and scrolled to a name she'd hoped she'd never need. Detective Park, Private Investigations. The cold dread in her bones had crystallized into something harder. Something decisive. If Suction was going to choose someone else, Karen needed to know exactly who Maeng Jee was, and why a dying woman's call could make her husband abandon his son on his birthday without looking back. She pressed the contact. Let it ring once. Twice. Detective Park. The voice was crisp, professional, awake despite the hour. "I need your help," Karen whispered into the darkness. "I need to know everything about a woman named Maeng Jee. Everything. And I need you to start tonight." There was a pause. Then, "Consider it done, Mrs. Cha." Karen hung up and stared at the ceiling, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and something else, something that felt dangerously like the beginning of the end of her marriage. What she didn't know yet was that Maeng Jee wasn't dying at all, and the truth about who she really was would destroy everything. The first withdrawal appeared 3 days after Brian's birthday. Karen stared at their bank statement, her coffee growing cold in her hand. 500 million Korean wons. $500 million won, gone in a single transaction. The notation read, "Medical expenses urgent." When Suction came home that night, late, always late now, Karen was waiting with the statement laid out like evidence. "What is this?" He barely glanced at it. Maeng Jee's treatments. Experimental protocol from Switzerland. It's her only chance. You withdrew $500 million won without telling me. She's dying, Karen. What was I supposed to do? Talk to your wife. Her voice cracked. That's our money. Money I helped you earn. The study door closed before she could finish. Over the next 6 weeks, Karen watched her husband disappear. He left early, came home late, sometimes not at all. She began documenting everything, bank statements, timestamps, the pattern of his absence unmistakable. But worse was what it did to Brian. Nightmares, bedwetting. Their bright 7-year-old stopped eating, stopped smiling. Then came the call from his teacher. Brian hit another child today. This isn't like him, Mrs. Cha. He needs help. Karen made a family therapy appointment. Thursday at 3. Suction promised to come. In the waiting room, Brian watched the door, legs swinging with hope that slowly died. 3 o'clock, 3:15, 3:40. When Suction finally called, Karen heard hospital sounds in the background. Maeng Jee had a crisis. I couldn't leave her. Karen looked at Brian's resigned face and hung up. That night, she waited in the dark. When Suction came home after midnight, her fury was ice cold. Our son is falling apart. He's 7 years old and he thinks you don't love him. Do you even see what you're doing? I'm trying to give a dying woman comfort in her final months. You're abandoning us. Suction's mask cracked. She's dying. I loved her before the blood. Before I became this. With her, I remember when my hands were clean. Karen's voice dropped to a whisper. And you're destroying your present. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, instinct, and she saw him preparing to leave again. Don't walk away from this conversation. But he was already moving to his study, already gone. Karen stood alone and pulled out her phone. Detective Park answered immediately. Mrs. Cha, I was about to call you. I've been investigating Maeng Jee's medical records. A pause that changed everything. She doesn't appear in any cancer treatment registry in Seoul. Either she's being treated somewhere that doesn't exist, or the illness isn't real. Karen's blood froze. What? And there's more. I found birth records from Busan. Maeng Jee's mother had a relationship with a married man in the 1980s. Park's voice dropped. Mrs. Cha, I think Maeng Jee might be your husband's half-sister. The phone slipped from Karen's hand. Detective Park called 3 weeks later. I have the report. We should meet. Karen sat in her car outside Brian's school, hands gripping the steering wheel as Park slid into the passenger seat and handed her a manila folder. The first page made her stomach drop. Maeng Jee has visited 4 hospitals in the past 2 months, Park said quietly. None have her listed as a cancer patient. No treatment records. No chemotherapy appointments. Nothing. Karen's hands trembled as she flipped through hospital logs, admission records, all coming up empty. Maybe it's a private facility. I checked the address your husband visits daily. The treatment center in Gangnam. Park pulled out photos. It's a luxury apartment. Top floor. No medical equipment. No nursing staff. I watched for 6 hours yesterday. Not a single doctor or nurse entered that building. The world tilted. Karen stared at images of an upscale residential building. Nothing medical about it. The money. The 500 million Korean wons. Sitting in Maeng Jee's personal account. Untouched. Not a single one spent on treatments. She's scamming him. Karen's voice was hollow. She's playing him and he can't see it because he's too consumed by guilt. Too desperate to save something from his past. Mrs. Cha. Park's expression was strange, almost pitying. There's something else. Something worse. She slid another folder across. Karen opened it with numb fingers. Birth certificates. Hospital records from Busan. A family tree that made her blood run cold. Maeng Jee's mother was Lee Sun-hee. She had a relationship in the 1980s with a married man who visited Busan regularly for business. Park's voice was gentle, like she was delivering a terminal diagnosis. That man was Cha Dae-young, your husband's father. Karen couldn't breathe. The documents swam before her eyes, dates, locations, timelines that aligned with sickening precision. You're saying Maeng Jee was born exactly 9 months after Cha Dae-young's visits to Busan stopped. Hospital records confirm Lee Sun-hee gave birth alone. No father listed on the birth certificate. Park pointed to another document. But the timeline is unmistakable. DNA would prove it, but based on everything I've found, Maeng Jee is your husband's half-sister. The car felt too small, the air too thin. Karen's mind raced through implications that made her want to vomit. Suction was destroying their marriage for his sister. A sister he didn't know existed. A woman who was lying about dying, manipulating him, taking his money. Does she know? Karen's voice cracked. Does Maeng Jee know they're related? Park nodded grimly. I interviewed her former neighbor, an elderly woman who's known the family for decades. She said Cha Dae-young visited Maeng Jee 3 years ago when he was dying. Showed up at her apartment, told her everything. That he was her father, that she had a half-brother who'd become powerful but dangerous. Karen's hands clenched into fists. What did he want from her? According to the neighbor, he asked Maeng Jee to reach out to Sukshin someday, to test if his son still had a good heart despite the life he'd chosen, to see if he could still be redeemed. Park's expression darkened. But based on what she's doing, the fake illness, the manipulation, draining your accounts while your marriage falls apart, she's not testing him. Karen's voice was ice. She's destroying him. That's my assessment. Karen sat in silence, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. Maeng Jee wasn't a victim. She was an architect. This entire thing, the dying act, the emotional manipulation, the money, was revenge. Revenge for being abandoned, for growing up without a father while Sukshin got everything. The neighbor said something else, Park added quietly. She said Maeng Jee was bitter, that she told her mother before she died, he gave his real son an empire and gave me nothing. One day, I'll show him what it feels like to lose everything. Karen looked through the windshield at Brian's school, at children streaming out for pickup, innocent and unburdened. Her son was in there, probably sitting alone, probably wondering why Appa never came to pick him up anymore. I need copies of everything, Karen said. Every document, every photo, every piece of evidence. Park handed her a flash drive. It's all here. What are you going to do? Karen didn't answer. She watched Sukshin's car pull up 3 spaces away. He'd promised to pick up Brian today. Another promise she hadn't believed he'd keep. But here he was, checking his phone, already distracted. She needed to tell him. Needed to show him the evidence, make him see what was really happening. But something held her back. A cold, analytical part of her brain, the lawyer she used to be, was already calculating. If she told Sukshin now, he'd confront Maeng Jee. And Maeng Jee would disappear, taking the truth with her. Karen needed answers first. Needed to look this woman in the eye and understand why. Why destroy a family? Why manipulate a man who didn't even know you were his sister? I'm going to talk to her, Karen said. To Maeng Jee. Alone. Park's eyes widened. Mrs. Cha, I don't think that's wise. I need to hear it from her. I need to know if she understands what she's done. Karen's voice was steel. And I need to tell her it's over. That evening, Karen watched Sukshin prepare to leave again. The same ritual, the same distant expression, the same man disappearing into someone else's life. He kissed Brian's forehead without really seeing him, mumbled something about being back late, and was gone. Karen waited until his car pulled away. Then she opened her laptop and pulled up the address Park had given her. The luxury apartment in Gangnam where Maeng Jee was dying. She was going to end this. Tonight. Karen grabbed her keys, checked on Brian sleeping peacefully. Finally peaceful after weeks of nightmares, and headed for the door. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I know you hired an investigator, Karen. Come see me. Let's talk woman to woman. You deserve the truth. MJ. Karen's blood went cold. Maeng Jee knew. Had known all along that she was being watched, investigated. And now she was inviting Karen into her web. Every instinct screamed danger. But Karen was done being the wife who waited, who endured, who let other women destroy her family. She texted back, I'm on my way. The apartment building in Gangnam was exactly as Detective Park described, luxury, not medical. Karen's heels clicked against marble as she rode the elevator to the top floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. The door opened before she could knock. Maeng Jee stood there, looking nothing like a dying woman. Her skin glowed with health, her posture strong. Behind her, Karen glimpsed the stage set, an oxygen tank gathering dust in the corner, empty pill bottles on the counter, fabricated medical charts stacked neatly on a desk. You're Karen, Sukshin's wife. Maeng Jee's voice was soft, calculated. She immediately clutched the doorframe, affecting weakness. I'm sorry, I'm having a difficult day. Stop. Karen's voice cut like a blade. You're not dying, and you're his half-sister. The performance evaporated instantly. Maeng Jee's eyes sharpened, a smile playing at her lips that made Karen's skin crawl. He told you. He doesn't know, does he? About being related. Maeng Jee laughed, a cold, bitter sound, and moved to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seoul's glittering skyline. The same view Suction had from their penthouse. The empire their father built for him, not for her. Our father came to me 3 years ago. Her voice dripped with venom. Dying, finally ready to acknowledge the bastard daughter he'd hidden for decades. He told me about Suction, his precious son, the one he built up, gave everything to. The heir to the empire. She turned, eyes blazing. While my mother and I got nothing. No money, no name, no father. Just shame and poverty in Busan. Karen's hands clenched into fists. What did he want? He asked me to reach out someday. To test if Suction still had humanity despite becoming a criminal. To see if his son could be redeemed. Maeng Jee's smile was razor sharp. So I did. I tested him. And he failed spectacularly. You lied about dying. I gave him a choice. Maeng Jee stepped closer, her voice rising. Stay with his wife and son, or chase a ghost. He chose the ghost. That's not manipulation, Karen. That's revelation. I'm showing you who he really is, a man so consumed by guilt and nostalgia that he can't see what's real. You fabricated a terminal illness to destroy his marriage. I proved what I always knew. Maeng Jee's eyes were ice. That Suction is exactly like our father. Selfish, willing to abandon his real family for a fantasy. Our father abandoned my mother for his legitimate wife. Suction is abandoning you and Brian for a memory of who he used to be. She smiled cruelly. I'm not destroying your marriage. He is. Karen's voice shook with rage. He doesn't know you're his sister. He thinks he's helping a dying woman. And whose fault is that? Maeng Jee's voice turned mocking. That he's so emotionally blind he can't see the truth? That he'd rather play savior to a stranger than be a father to his son? You can tell him everything, Karen. It won't matter. The damage is done. He's already chosen. Karen stared at this woman, this bitter, twisted mirror of her husband's past, and realized arguing was pointless. Maeng Jee wanted destruction, wanted Suction to suffer the way she'd suffered. I'm telling him everything, Karen said, turning toward the door. Tonight. Maeng Jee's laugh followed her into the hallway. Go ahead. Watch him come crawling back to apologize. But you'll always know, won't you, that when it mattered most, he chose me over you. Over Brian. That truth doesn't go away just because you expose my lies. Karen didn't respond. She walked to the elevator on shaking legs, her mind racing. Maeng Jee was right about one thing. The damage was done. Whether Suction knew the truth or not, he'd made his choices. Had abandoned his family for a ghost. But he deserved to know what he'd sacrificed everything for. Deserved to see exactly how blind he'd been. Karen drove home in silence, Detective Park's evidence folder on the passenger seat. When she arrived at the penthouse, she went straight to their bedroom and laid everything out on the bed, like a prosecutor preparing for trial. Medical records proving Maeng Jee had never been sick. Bank statements showing the 500 million Korean wons untouched in her account. Birth certificates and hospital records from Busan. The family tree connecting them. Witness statements from neighbors. The evidence of his sister's calculated revenge. The proof of his devastating blindness. Karen sat in the dark living room and waited. Midnight came and went. Finally, at 12:47 a.m., she heard his key in the lock. Suction walked in, exhausted, smelling faintly of the perfume that wasn't Karen's. He saw her sitting there and froze. Karen, why are you up? We need to talk. Her voice was eerily calm. And this time, you're going to listen to every word. Something in her tone made him pale. What's wrong? Karen stood slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. Everything. Everything is wrong. And you're about to find out exactly how wrong. She walked toward their bedroom, knowing he would follow, knowing that in the next 10 minutes, his entire world would shatter. The evidence waited on their bed like a death sentence, and Karen was done protecting him from the truth. Karen turned on the bedroom lights. The evidence exploded across their bed like a crime scene. Documents, photographs, bank statements, birth certificates scattered like shrapnel waiting to detonate. Suction's face drained of color. What is all this? The truth. Karen's voice was eerily calm, the kind of calm that comes after something inside you dies. Maeng Jee isn't dying. The medical records are fake. The treatments don't exist. The 500 million Korean wons you gave her? Sitting untouched in her personal account. His hands trembled as he picked up a hospital document. That's impossible. I've seen her. She's weak in pain, she can barely. It's an act. Karen picked up another folder. The one that would destroy him completely. And there's more. So much more. She opened it slowly, watching his face. Maeng Jee is your half-sister. Your father had an affair with her mother in Busan in the 1980s. He told her the truth 3 years ago on his deathbed. The words seemed to float in the air, not quite landing. Suction stared at the family tree, at hospital records from Busan, at timelines that aligned with sickening precision. No, that's not, she would have told me. Why would she? Karen's voice cracked. She's been manipulating you from the start. The dying act, the emotional appeals, draining our accounts, it's all revenge. Your father asked her to test if you still had humanity. She decided to destroy you instead, to prove you'd abandon your real family, just like he abandoned hers. Suction collapsed onto the bed, evidence crunching beneath him. Karen watched the powerful crime boss, the man who made grown men beg, reduced to something broken and small. I need to talk to her. His voice was hollow. Don't bother. I already did. Karen's tone could have frozen fire. She admitted everything, laughed about it, said you deserved it, said she was just showing me who you really are. Suction looked up at his wife, really looked at her for the first time in months. Karen's eyes were hollow, her face gaunt. Behind her, through the open door, Brian's room sat dark and empty. The joy that used to live there long gone. Karen, I didn't know. That's the problem. Her control shattered. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You were so desperate to absolve yourself of guilt, so caught up in playing hero to your dying first love, that you couldn't see reality. Tears streamed down her face. I gave up everything for you. My legal career. My family. My mother won't even speak to me because of who you are, what you do. I've stood by you through violence and blood and fear. And you threw it all away for a woman who was actively destroying us. I'll fix this. Desperation crept into his voice. I'll end things with her. We'll go to therapy. I'll be there for Brian every day. It's too late. Karen pulled divorce papers from the nightstand drawer. She'd had them prepared for days, hoping she'd never use them, knowing she would. Her hands didn't shake. I'm done, Suction. Not because you had feelings for another woman. I could have forgiven that. I'm done because you're so emotionally damaged you couldn't see someone destroying your life right in front of you. What happens with the next manipulation? The next crisis? Her voice broke. How do I ever trust you again? Please, he reached for her, but Karen stepped back like his touch would burn. I'm leaving. I'm taking Brian. And you're not going to look for us. You can't take my son. His voice rose, desperate, commanding. The voice that usually made people obey. Karen's laugh was cold as winter. Watch me. I've documented everything. Your criminal activities, the money laundering through legitimate fronts, every illegal deal. If you try to find us, if you threaten me, it all goes to the authorities. You'll lose your empire and your freedom. The words hit like bullets. Suction stared at her, finally understanding she'd been preparing for this. Planning. She'd outmaneuvered him completely. Karen, please. I love you. She laughed again, broken, bitter, the sound of something dying. You love the idea of me. The woman who made you feel legitimate, who stood beside the monster you became. But you don't actually see me. If you did, you would have known I was worth more than this. She walked toward Brian's room. Suction heard her gentle voice through the door. Come on, baby. Wake up. We're going on an adventure. Mommy. Brian's sleepy voice. Where's Appa? It's just us now, sweetheart. Just us. Suction stood frozen as Karen emerged carrying Brian, their son's arms wrapped around her neck, his face buried in her shoulder. Brian didn't even look at him. Karen, wait. But she was already at the door, a small bag in her free hand. She'd packed days ago, he realized. Been ready to leave for days. Sign the papers, she said without looking back. My lawyer will contact you. The door closed. By dawn, they were gone. Clothes, photos, Brian's toys vanished. The penthouse echoed with absence. On the kitchen counter, Suction found a letter in Karen's precise handwriting. His hand shook as he read it, each word a knife. You had everything. A woman who loved you. A son who worshipped you. And you destroyed it for a ghost who hated you. I hope one day you understand what you've lost. But by then, we'll be too far gone to care. Don't look for us. Let us heal. K. Suction's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Did she tell you? Did you finally learn the truth, brother? Our father was right. You have no heart left. You deserve every bit of this pain. Enjoy your empty empire. MJ. He stared at the message, at the word brother, at the casual cruelty, and something inside him finally broke completely. His sister. Maeng Jee was his sister, and he destroyed his family for her revenge. Suction sank to the floor of his empty penthouse, surrounded by luxury that meant nothing, and for the first time since he was a boy, he wept. But his tears changed nothing. Karen and Brian were gone. And deep in the criminal underworld, without Karen's strategic brilliance to protect him, the first cracks in Suction's empire were already beginning to show. The penthouse echoed with absence. Every room held ghosts, Brian's laughter, Karen's footsteps, the life that used to fill these walls. Suction moved through the emptiness like a man already dead. He confronted Maeng Jee one final time. She answered her door with a smile that could cut glass. Come to thank me, brother. You destroyed my family. His voice was hollow. You lied about everything. I revealed the truth. She leaned against the doorframe, triumphant. Our father asked me to test if you had a heart left. You don't. You chose a stranger's pain over your own son's. You're exactly the monster he raised you to be. Her smile widened. I didn't destroy your family, Suction. You did. I just held up the mirror. Without Karen, his empire crumbled. Suction realized too late that she'd been managing everything. The legitimate businesses that launder money, the legal structures that protected him from prosecution. She'd been his shield and he'd thrown her away. Authorities moved in. Allies betrayed him. Territory vanished overnight. The man who'd controlled half of Seoul couldn't control anything anymore. 9 months of desperate searching. Every private investigator came back empty. Karen was too smart, had covered her tracks too well. Suction liquidated assets to fund the search, watching his wealth evaporate. His power, his respect, everything. He became a ghost haunting his empty penthouse, staring at photos of a family that no longer existed. Then, finally, we found them. Taegu, your wife's using her maiden name, Karen Williams, working at a legal aid clinic. Suction drove to Taegu with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. He parked outside her office and waited, watching the door like a man waiting for salvation. When Karen emerged, his breath caught. She looked different, lighter somehow. Her shoulders no longer carrying the weight of his choices. Professional. Free. She was laughing with a colleague, her natural hair framing her face, looking like the woman she'd been before him. Karen. She froze mid-laugh, turned slowly, the warmth drained from her face, replaced by something harder. Colder. How did you find us? Not anger. Just exhaustion. I needed to see you. To apologize. To explain. There's nothing to explain. Her voice was calm, final, the voice of someone who'd already moved on. You made your choices. Now live with them. I was manipulated. The words sounded weak even to him. You were blind. She corrected him like a teacher with a stubborn student. There's a difference. Maeng Jee showed you exactly what you wanted to see. A chance to be the hero, to save someone, to absolve your guilt for all the blood on your hands. And you took it without thinking about the people who actually loved you. She paused, her eyes piercing him. That's not manipulation, Suction. That's who you are. I want to see Brian. Desperation crept into his voice. He's in therapy, learning to process his father's abandonment. Karen's eyes were hard as diamonds. You can have supervised visits. 1 hour a week at a neutral location. But I won't take you back. Not ever. What if I change? His voice cracked. What if I prove I'm different? Then you'll be a better father to Brian. She stepped closer and he saw the woman he'd fallen in love with. Strong, unflinching, done with his excuses. But you'll never be my husband again. I deserve better than a man who couldn't see my value until I was gone. And Brian deserves a father who chooses him first, not as an afterthought when his guilt gets too heavy to carry. Karen, please. We're done. She cut him off. Sign the divorce papers my lawyer sent you. Set up trust funds for Brian. And learn to live with what you destroyed. Her voice softened just slightly, almost pitying. I hope one day you find peace, Suction. But you won't find it with us. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement with finality. Suction stood frozen, watching the life he could have had disappear into the Tegu afternoon. Mommy, a child's voice rang out. Suction's heart stopped. Brian emerged from a nearby building, taller now, his mixed features more defined, his curly hair longer. He was laughing, carefree in a way Suction had never seen. He ran to Karen, who caught him in her arms. How was piano practice, baby? I played the whole piece without mistakes. Mr. Lee said I'm ready for the recital. I'm so proud of you. Karen kissed his forehead, and Brian beamed. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Then Brian's eyes landed on Suction. The joy evaporated. He pressed closer to Karen, his small body tense with recognition and fear. Is that? Brian's voice dropped to a whisper. Is that him? Karen's arm tightened protectively around their son. Yes, baby, but we're leaving now. I don't want to talk to him. Brian's voice was small, wounded. Please, Mom, can we go? The words destroyed Suction more thoroughly than any bullet could have. His son, his 7-year-old son, was afraid of him. Didn't want to know him. Brian. Suction took a step forward. Don't. Karen's voice was a whip crack. You've done enough damage. She guided Brian away, and Suction watched them disappear around a corner, his son's small hand clutching his mother's like a lifeline. He stood alone on that Tegu street, the autumn wind cutting through his expensive coat that meant nothing anymore, and understood with devastating clarity. He'd lost them completely. That night, Suction sat in a cheap hotel room and made the call. Liquidate everything, he told his lawyer. The remaining businesses, properties, investments. Set up trust funds for Brian, education, living expenses, everything. And donate to Karen's legal aid clinic. A significant amount. Sir, that will leave you with almost nothing. I already have nothing. He hung up and stared at his phone at the last photo he had of them together, Brian's 6th birthday. All three of them laughing, before Maeng Jee, before everything fell apart. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he opened it. A photo loaded slowly. His breath caught. It was Brian at his piano recital. The one Suction had just heard about. Brian in a small suit, hands on the keys, face concentrated and beautiful. And in the audience, front row, sat Karen, next to a man Suction didn't recognize. The man's hand rested casually on the back of Karen's chair. He was leaning in, whispering something that made her smile. The caption below read, he's moving on too. They both are. Without you. A concerned friend. Suction's hand shook. The image burned into his retinas. Another man in the space that should have been his. Another man making Karen smile. Another man showing up for his son. His phone rang immediately after. Unknown number again. He answered without thinking. Hello, brother. Maeng Jee's voice was silk and poison. Did you see? She's already replacing you. That's Dr. James Morrison. Works at the international school. Brian adores him. Calls him Teacher James. And Karen. Well, she looks happy, doesn't she? Happier than she ever looked with you. Why are you doing this? Suction's voice was raw. Because you need to understand what you've lost. Completely. Irrevocably. Her laugh was cruel. You'll spend the rest of your life watching from the shadows while another man becomes the father Brian needed. while another man gets the woman you threw away. That's your punishment, Suction. Not death, not prison, living with what you destroyed. The line went dead. Suction stared at the photo, at Karen's smile, at Brian's concentration, at the man who was already building the life Suction had abandoned. And for the first time since Karen left, he understood. Some things, once broken, can never be fixed. Some losses are permanent, and he would spend the rest of his life learning to live with that truth. But the question that would haunt him forever was this. Was Karen really moving on? Or was Maeng Jee manipulating him one final time? And did it even matter anymore? 6 months later, Suction sat in a modest Daegu apartment, 1 bedroom, no view, nothing like the penthouse that used to define him. His empire was gone, liquidated into trust funds for Brian and substantial donations to Karen's legal clinic. The crown he'd killed for meant nothing when there was no one left to share it with. Saturday afternoon, his 1 hour with Brian. They met at a supervised visitation center, neutral territory where a social worker sat nearby, watching. Hello, Mr. Cha. Brian's voice was polite, distant. Not Appa. Never Appa anymore. Hi, Brian. How was school this week? Fine. Brian focused on the puzzle between them, not meeting his eyes. I got an A on my English essay. That's wonderful. Your mom must be proud. She is. A small smile appeared, not for Suction, but at the mention of Karen. She helped me edit it. She's really good at writing. Did you know she published an article last month? About helping abuse victims. Suction's throat tightened. No, I didn't know. The hour crawled by, stilted conversation, long silences, Brian checking the clock every few minutes. When the social worker finally said, "Time's up," Brian's relief was palpable. Goodbye, Mr. Cha. Goodbye, son. Brian walked out without looking back, into Karen's arms in the waiting room. She held him close, whispering something that made him laugh. Then she glanced at Suction through the window, not with hatred, just profound sadness for the man who destroyed everything. She'd moved on, not to another man. Maeng Jee's photo had been another manipulation, but to herself. Karen had rebuilt her legal career, was publishing groundbreaking articles on domestic abuse law, had become a voice for women who'd lost themselves in dangerous relationships. She was thriving. Brian was thriving. Without him. Suction returned to his empty apartment and stared at the single photo he'd kept, their family, before everything fell apart. Before Maeng Jee. Before his blind guilt destroyed them all. His phone buzzed. A message from Karen's lawyer. Mrs. Williams requests you stop watching from across the street during pickup. Brian has noticed. It's affecting his therapy progress. Even from a distance, he was still hurting his son. Suction deleted the message and made a decision. He would move back to Seoul, give them space to heal completely. He would continue the trust fund payments, the donations, the supervised visits when Brian wanted them. But he would stop haunting their new life. He'd spend the rest of his days earning back a fraction of what he'd lost, knowing it would never be enough. The cost of emotional blindness was permanent. Some betrayals couldn't be forgiven. Some families, once broken, stayed broken. And the man who'd once controlled an empire now controlled nothing, not even his son's affection. Some betrayals aren't about infidelity. They're about being so consumed by who you used to be that you destroy who you could have become. Love ignored doesn't just fade. It transforms into strength for those wise enough to walk away. If you enjoyed this story, support us by dropping a like and subscribing. See you in the next one.